Prince Harry is forcing King Charles into an impossible choice between him and William family dinners are awkward enough when everyone actually likes each other. But when you're dealing with the British royal family, every invitation feels less like a meal and more like a high-stakes chess move with global consequences. And right now, King Charles is stuck in what might be the most painful position of his entire life. He's caught between two sons who haven't spoken in years, and a decision that could end up defining his reign as king. Because Prince Harry is reportedly planning to ask his father to stand beside him at next year's Invictus Games on the surface that sounds simple, a son wants his dad's support at a charity event, honouring wounded veterans. What father wouldn't say yes? But this isn't just about showing up and smiling for cameras. This is about choosing sides in a family war that's been playing out across tabloids, tell-all interviews, explosive memoirs and years of icy silence. And it puts Charles, a man who has spent his entire life avoiding confrontation and searching for compromise, in a position where there may be no middle ground left. For the first time, he might be forced to pick a son. This whole situation really goes back to last September, when Harry made a quiet return to the UK that felt different from his usual fly-in fly-out visits. He met privately with his father at Clarence House, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a genuine glimmer of hope, witnesses said. Harry walked out of that meeting with a literal spring in his step. His spokesperson later confirmed that he loved being back on British soil, and for royal watchers, it felt like a door that had been welded shut for years had finally cracked open. Now Harry seems ready to walk straight through that door, according to royal sources. He desperately wants his father to play a prominent role when the Invictus Games return to the UK for the first time since 2014. Not just attend, not just send a polite message of support. Harry reportedly wants Charles to open the event on stage right there beside him. Think about that for a second. It would be a massive moment of healing broadcast to millions around the world, a public display of reconciliation, a visual signal that father and son are trying to rebuild something that's been broken for years. But there's one huge problem. His name is Prince William. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the latest royal drama and breaking news everyone's talking about. William hasn't spoken to his brother since their grandmother's funeral in September 2022, and by all accounts, he has zero interest in breaking that silence anytime soon. Yes, William and Kate attended the very first Invictus Games back in 2014, but that was before everything fell apart, before the Oprah interview, before the Netflix series, before the memoir that dragged their private fights into public view. Harry's book Spare didn't just burn bridges, it incinerated them. He wrote about a physical fight with William. He criticised Kate. He painted his brother as jealous, hot-tempered, and trapped by the institution. Those aren't the kind of words you take back with a quiet apology and a handshake. And William has made his feelings clear the only way he knows how, through silence, distance, and total emotional shutdown. So when Harry asks Charles to stand with him at the Invictus Games, he's not just asking for fatherly support, he's asking his father to publicly align himself with one son over the other. He's asking the King of England to be photographed smiling and applauding Harry's achievements, while William watches from whatever palace office he happens to be working in that day. Royal expert Jenny Bond put it bluntly when she told the Mirror that this puts Charles in an impossible position. Any father would want to support his son's greatest achievement, especially something as meaningful as the Invictus Games, which honours wounded military personnel and veterans. But Charles isn't just any father, he's the king. And in the royal family, nothing is ever just personal. If Charles shows up and stands on that stage with Harry, it sends a very loud message. It says Harry is welcomed back into the fold. It says the past can be forgiven. It says reconciliation is possible. But it also sends a message to William. And that message is complicated. William has spent the last few years doing everything right by royal standards. He bit his lip during the Oprah interview. He stayed silent when the Netflix documentary dropped. He refused to clap back when Spare accused him of violence and jealousy. He focused on duty. While dealing with his wife's cancer diagnosis, he stepped up, while his father battled his own health crisis. So, to see Charles publicly throw his support behind Harry after all of that too, William, that could feel like a slap in the face. Jenny Bond didn't sugarcoat it. She said the king may genuinely have to choose between his warring sons, and there is no good option. And the timing couldn't be worse. The Invictus Games are scheduled to kick off in Birmingham on July 10, 2027 and run through July 17th, which just happens to be Queen Camilla's 80th birthday. So now Charles isn't just choosing between Harry and William, he's also choosing between a veterans event, and his wife's milestone birthday organisers have admitted they're aware of the birthday conflict, but they're hoping Charles can still attend the opening ceremony and key events throughout the week, while honouring his commitments to Camilla. In other words, they're asking a man in his late 70s who's recovering from cancer and trying to hold a fractured family together to perform a logistical and emotional juggling act that would exhaust anyone. Still, the organisers seem optimistic, maybe too optimistic. A spokesperson said last week that the royal family have been long-standing supporters of the Invictus Games since 2014. And while it's too early to confirm who will attend, they would very much welcome their presence. But behind the scenes, the real question isn't who will attend, it's who King Charles is willing to hurt. Because whatever choice he makes, whether he stands beside Harry or keeps his distance to protect William, one son, he's going to walk away feeling abandoned, and that may be the moment that finally breaks what's left of this royal family for good. And here's the thing, invitations haven't even gone out yet, and already this whole situation feels like a ticking emotional time bomb. Because once those invites are sent, it's going to force some brutally uncomfortable conversations, not just between Harry and Charles, but inside the palace walls behind closed doors, and across an entire family that hasn't mastered the art of honesty in decades. One major factor that could decide whether Harry even shows up at all, let alone brings Meghan and the kids, is the never-ending battle over security. Harry lost a high court case last year when he tried to overturn the decision to downgrade his taxpayer-funded police protection after stepping down as a working royal. And he didn't take that loss quietly. He publicly blamed his father for the situation and said flat out that he couldn't see a world where he would bring Meghan and their children back to the UK under the current security setup. That wasn't just a legal argument, that was an emotional ultimatum, but now Harry is waiting on a Home Office review of that ruling. And according to royal expert Jenny Bond, this review could end up being the key that unlocks everything. Because if the review results in the level of protection Harry is demanding, there would suddenly be no obvious excuse left to keep the Sussex family away, and that would finally give King Charles the chance to see his grandchildren Archie and Lilibet, who he hasn't spent real time with since the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee back in June 2022. Let that sink in. Nearly 5 years of missed birthdays, 5 years of missed Christmas mornings, 5 years of missed bedtime story school milestones and ordinary grandfather moments that he will never get back for a man who reportedly adores being a grandfather to William's children. That distance from Harry's kids must feel like a second kind of grief, layered on top of everything else he's already dealing with. Then there's the Meghan question, and that's the one nobody in the palace wants to talk about out loud. The Duchess of Sussex has made absolutely no secret of how she feels about Britain, and if we're being honest, the feeling seems pretty mutual among large portions of the British public. To many people, Meghan is still seen as the woman who took Harry away and convinced him to air the family's dirty laundry on international television. So, any discussion about Harry returning to the UK automatically turns into a discussion about whether Meghan would even step foot there again. But Jenny Bond points out something important: Meghan is too savvy to skip the Invictus Games. If Harry attends, she's supported him at these events before, and staying away this time wouldn't make the story disappear, it would actually make it louder. The headlines would write themselves: Meghan refuses to return to Britain. Marriage trouble. Is Meghan controlling Harry's movements? Every absence would be spun into a scandal. And here's the strategic part: inside the protective bubble of Invictus, Meghan would actually be safe. The veterans and their families adore her. They always have. That support would create a kind of emotional shield against the skepticism and hostility she'd face elsewhere in Britain. Jenny Bond believes Meghan understands that calculation perfectly, and if Harry goes, there's a very strong chance she'll be right there beside him, not just out of loyalty or obligation, but out of pure strategic necessity. What makes this whole situation even more complicated is what it represents beyond just one event. Because the Invictus Games aren't just another charity project for Harry, they They are his defining achievement, the one part of his royal legacy that hasn't been completely swallowed by controversy. He founded them back in 2014 after being inspired by the Warrior Games he witnessed in the United States. And since then, they've grown into a massive international movement that's genuinely changed lives. Veterans who've lost limbs, veterans who've suffered PTSD, veterans who carry invisible wounds nobody else can see. So many of them have found purpose, identity and community through Invictus. This is Harry at his best, channeling his privilege, his platform and his pain into something that actually matters. Any father would be proud of that, and Charles almost certainly is. But here's the problem: being proud in private and demonstrating that pride on a public stage are two very different things. When your other son is watching and quietly keeping score, William has his own causes and his own achievements, from mental health advocacy to environmental initiatives, and he's done serious, meaningful work, but none of them carry quite the same emotional punch or global recognition as Invictus. And that's not a criticism of William, it's just reality. Which means every time Charles smiles beside Harry at an Invictus event, every time he applauds that legacy, every time he offers a public word of praise, it risks reopening a wound with the son who stayed behind and played by the rules. And that's why this isn't just about a veterans event, it's about a family that still hasn't figured out how to love both sons the same way in public. Because in private, Charles can tell Harry he's proud. In private, he can tell William he understands his pain. But the moment he steps onto that stage, the moment he chooses where to stand, that becomes a message to the world. And in this family, messages matter more than words. So the real question isn't whether King Charles will attend the Invictus Games. The real question is this: which son is he willing to lose to keep the other?